Hello, everyone. I just want to welcome everyone. This is the kickoff session to Reimagine's series, Pain to Purpose, Redesigning Our Careers and Lives. My name is Andrew Engel, and I'm Senior Programmer at Reimagine. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white cisgender male with glasses, salt and pepper hair. I've got a bright orange wall in the back, and I've got a yellow and blue checkered shirt today. Reimagine is a nonprofit organization catalyzing a unique and powerful community, people of different backgrounds, ages, races, and faiths, and people of no faith, coming together in the hopes of healing ourselves and the world. We specifically support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality at our own pace, and actively channeling life's challenges into meaningful action and growth. We at Reimagine believe that reflecting on what matters most can help us achieve purpose, results, and impact both in our professional lives and in our personal lives. Certainly, what matters most is the things that bring us joy, and we'll be talking about that. Also, it's important to talk about the struggle that we have with adversity. So this three-part series will delve into how facing loss can lead us to a reevaluation of our careers and an expansion of our personal life journeys. All these events will take place over the next 2 Wednesdays, so I hope you'll join us. I'll be sharing a link out to register as soon as I'm done talking. So I want to acknowledge that the majority of us are here from the United States on this call, also known the United States, also known as Turtle Island by Native Americans and their allies. I'm in Lenapehoking, where a large city called New York is located on occupied land. Wherever you are, I ask you to join me in acknowledging Indigenous communities in North America, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. And I am stating this because it's a small step, to continue dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and white supremacy. We're all interested in knowing where you are. If you haven't done so yet, please put that in the chat. And I'll also be pasting a helpful link called native-land.ca. And you can check out to learn about locations of Indigenous people where you are. Everyone who has registered for this session will get a recording. So I wanted to let you know that as well. So now I'm going to stop sharing. I can look at all of you more easily. Today we've got 4 fabulous innovators who share an interest in looking at career through the lens of justice and inclusion, but also with the perspective of finding joy. I met Pamela Larde, our moderator for today's conversation, a year ago at the first annual Summit for Post-Traumatic Growth. And I have to say, Pamela, it's been a joyful collaboration.
Agreed.
Pamela is an author and educator who founded the Academy of Creative Coaching, one of the first Black female-owned accredited coaching schools in the world. And she's deeply committed to infusing values of belonging and dignity into her work as a coach. We're going to let all of our speakers introduce themselves, but I'll be pasting links in the chat so you can read more about them in their full bios. Our guests will be in conversation for around 40 minutes. If you have questions along the way, please put those in the chat. We'll have time at the end for Q&A, and I like calling on people to ask their questions. So if you're up for that, I hope so. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Pamela. Thank you, Pamela.
All right. Well, thank you, Andy, so much for such a thorough and robust introduction and opening. I echo a lot of the sentiments that you were saying, especially about recognizing what land we're on, and just taking that time to reflect on that. So thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I want to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves, and I'm going to do it in the order that they appear on the screen next to me, in the screen in front of me. And so we'll start with Dr. Chinasa Elue.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chinasa Elue. I am a professor, an author, a speaker, and a grief coach located here in the Metro Atlanta area. I am excited to engage in this conversation with you all today. As we get into ways that we can have a joyful career, I'll share rather briefly that my career has been marked by many events, but one of the most pivotal moments, one of the most defining moments, however, was when I lost my mom in 2019. And that really reshaped and redirected how I saw myself as a professional and the ways that I wanted to have impact, both within the workplace and outside of that. So I look forward to sharing more of my story with you all today. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we have Adrion Porter.
Hello, thank you, Pamela. Hello, party people. I'm very honored to be here. You guys can read my bios for all the long drawn out, but I'll just give a quick snapshot. My name is Adrion Porter. I'm a speaker, a career strategist, advisor, a passionate age diversity advocate, and I'm the founder of a platform called Mid-Career Mastery. And it's for organizations and people in the middle, i.e. midlife, mid-career, 40 plus, what have you. And my mission is to help people master and maximize their middle years, which all leads to what I call my North Star why and my purpose is to eliminate the very universal and common mid-career and midlife malaise. And so read on the bio, but I'm very excited to have this conversation. It's very important and meaningful conversation.
And by the way, Adrion, I saw a post that you said the malaise is real, and I had to say out loud, "Oh my gosh, yes, it is." Yes.
We'll unpack that a little bit more in this conversation, but yes, it is.
Absolutely. Thank you. And next, Roshan Paul.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Roshan Paul. I'm currently the director of the leadership practice at IREX, which is a large global international development organization based in Washington, D.C. But my whole career for more than 20 years now has really been dedicated to helping people to achieve their potential in terms of making the world a better place. So really helping people with their career journeys to make social impact all around the world. I'm from India originally, but I've lived on almost every continent, and I've been calling DC home for the last 18 months or so, and looking forward to talking more with all of you.
And my apologies, did you say Roshan?
Yes, like ocean.
Okay, I'm gonna get it. I gotta get it right. I'm a big pronunciation. So yes, Roshan. Thank you. So I wanted to start off kind of where Chinasa had started, and what she initially was talking about was the pivotal moment in her life that really made an impact on her career. And I would love to also hear that from Adrion and Roshan, if you would be, and we'll start with Adrion.
Okay, wow. So there are so many moments, but the one, I guess, is more about a period in time where I had multiple moments of malaise and ennui. And so, and I talk about it, that's a lot in what I do, about this common, universal, and very universal and proven U curve that we all go through. It's called the happiness U curve. And so as you age, you start off in your early adulthood at a certain level of self-reported happiness and life satisfaction and work satisfaction, but it tends to plummet as you get older, and it dips in its lowest point during your 40s and your 50s, believe it or not. But then it increases as you get older. So my goal is to flatten that U curve. But for me, at the bottom of my U curve is when probably around the years of between 2013 and 2016, when I lost I would say around 5 to 6 people that were close to me, starting with my grandmother and my grandfather, who on my mother's side, I'm an only child. And so I was very close to them. My grandfather first, and then my grandmother 2 years after that. Actually, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother passed away 6 hours before my daughter was born. And so,
Mm.
no, 6 hours after, I'm sorry, my daughter was born. So you talk about the circle of life and a very unique intersection of emotions. But then in 2016, my best friend, who was the best man at my wedding, who was my age, he passed away in a car accident. And then that same year in 2016, my 18-year-old nephew by marriage passed away suddenly. So I had a lot of deaths in my family, especially in my 40s. And we all go through this natural feeling of malaise, especially during those middle years. But mine was magnified due to these circumstances that were not planned. And so for me, it really allowed me to self-reflect and practice a lot of what I preach as far as reframing my mindset and try to just rediscover meaning, to be more intentional in that, because I understand, number one, that life is fleeting. More importantly, I understand more than ever life is fleeting, and that we have to intentionally find a way to live a purposeful life, because you just never know. And so I would say those years between 2013 and 2016 was probably the most alarming and emotional period in my life, where I had to make a decision and really lean more into a very meaningful life and purposeful career. So that was my long drawn out answer. But
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you so much.
yes.
And Roshan?
Yeah. So my most pivotal moment probably happened in my senior year of college, which was also the year of 9/11, and followed by terrorist attacks in my home country, in India as well, and ethnic rioting, but also the US then, going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. All of this as I was graduating college and looking at, normal sort of careers in investment banking or management consulting. But it seemed to me that the two countries I knew best were on fire, and what good would I do, in a consulting firm? So I actually ended up turning down a prestigious opportunity and moving back to India to start working in social entrepreneurship. But it was really driven by hearing so many people say that, I could have so easily been in those buildings in the World Trade Center, right? We saw so many of those testimonials of people changing their lives because of how close they themselves came to death on 9/11. And that really struck me as I was contemplating what I wanted to do with my career. And then shortly, a couple of years after that, as I was starting on my career, I lost my dad. So I think this theme of losing family members seems to be quite prevalent in the panel. And a few years after that, also lost one of my dearest friends in an accident. And it just, again, that's what Adrion said about that sense of life being so fleeting, and how do you make the most of every single day, and how do you make the most of your, making the world a better place, and leaving a legacy behind, because you were here. That's been something that I think has been, very much a big part of my life as well.
Thank you. And I will also share that the pivotal transition in my own personal life and career came with divorce. So a very different experience of loss, but one that completely shifts and undergirds, or just, I guess, shakes the ground that you're living on. And for me, meant moving from one part of the country to another, starting an entirely new career, and trying to figure out what life is going to look like as a single parent, as well, and I'll say really co-parenting, because their father is very much involved in the parenting process. So what is that going to look like, and the transition? How does that look for a career, and all of those things? So that would definitely be the one, for me in my case. Now, given that this conversation is about joy, and what's interesting about joy is that joy is something we recognize even more intensely when we've had hardship, when we've experienced grief, when we've understood what it feels like to have pain. That dichotomy of joy and pain really makes the two much more obvious. So, talking about joy and your career, what does a joyful career mean to you, and how can individuals strive towards it in their respective fields?
I'll start by mentioning, I shared a little bit earlier that, my pivotal moment was when I lost my mom. And, when you have a debilitating loss like that, and you kind of are going about life and you're thinking everything is going to be the same, when that happens, it's like my world literally stopped. And so it was 9 months before the pandemic. It was in the midst of this grief journey that I was on that everything began to unwind with the world. And so it provided a unique opportunity for me to begin to think about just life at baseline, but then more specifically my career and what that would look like as I looked at the next frontier. I knew that I wanted to make sure that the work I was doing was in alignment with my values of care and justice and equity overall. And so I began to think about what might that look like as I'm looking to cultivate a joyful career in that vein. And I think it's really important when we're thinking about ways for ourselves to really have this joyful career experience that we think about our personalized values and think about how that aligns with the organizations that we're a part of. And if we are in misalignment, perhaps maybe there are other ways to enact our values in other spaces. Maybe the job has a different purpose, i.e. paying the bills or some other need where we can feel like, okay, I'm here for this particular thing, but I want to make sure I'm doing work more in alignment with my values external to this organization. So I think it varies, but for me, it was really getting crystal clear on my personal values and how that will impact my work.
I love that answer, especially because we, as beautiful as it sounds that we'll all be enjoy in our careers, the reality is sometimes the careers just bring the money in to pay the bills. So what do we do with that? And I want to give the other two gentlemen a chance to answer this question, but I want you to, can you just quickly describe what you mean when you say life at the baseline, what life and the baseline means?
So when I was referring to life at the baseline in terms of my values, I think a lot of times when we are just going through life, right, we kind of get into this even kill pattern of just going with the flow. And I think that when we have these moments where there's a full stop moment where something shakes things up, i.e. for me it was death, and then a few months later was the pandemic, that was a complete reconfiguration of how I was able to see and interpret the world. And so at baseline, how I was seeing the world was drastically shifting. I lost one of my best friends through my mom passing. I began to see the world transform and change right before my eyes. It was being made every day. And so the baseline was no longer in existence for me. And so it provided a unique opportunity to really begin to reimagine, what does this next phase or season of my career look like? How might I leverage my imagination to really just dream about something different or dream bigger again? Because I think that got stifled because I was just going with the flow.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thank you so much. So Roshan, and I'll restate the question. What does a joyful career mean to you, and how can individuals strive for it in their respective careers?
Sure. There's an organization called the Happiness Research Institute, and they did some research a few years ago, and they found that when it comes to happiness at work, the single biggest predictor of happiness at work is having a sense of purpose at your job, and that this is twice as as important as the next thing on the list, which, by the way, was having a good manager. And similar findings you can see all across the field of positive psychology as well. So for me, it's really about working for a purpose that's larger than yourself, right? About serving others, making a difference in the world. And this looks different for different people. It looks different at different stages of your life. Like in early career, your sense of purpose might be different than when you're raising a family or paying off a mortgage, or when your kids are off to college, let's say. And so, your purpose can take different forms. You could be an entrepreneur, you could be a manager, you might, even be a volunteer, but the core essence, remains the same, and or could remain the same. It'll evolve with time, but there's a deeper essence that if you can tap into that will remain the same, right? And which, incidentally, isn't this what all our faith traditions also talk about, right? That life is about serving others. And so what I always say is, like, if science and faith can agree, then we should really listen, to what they're saying, right? And then the last piece I would say is, like, make sure you're celebrating enough, right? Celebrate the small wins that connect you to your purpose and that make you feel like you're fulfilled, because that brings joy, that brings meaning, and that also leads to recommitting to that purpose and recommitting to experiencing that joy over and over again.
Thank you so much for that. And I have a follow-up question, but I'm going to ask all of you that question after we get a chance to hear Adrion. So Adrion, what are your thoughts?
Joy. So to me, And I talk about this a lot when I talk about mastery, because mastery is really dominion over something. When you have control and dominion, and you're really leaned into something, especially how you feel and your level of happiness and joy. But to me, it starts with having, again, to Roshan's point, you know, having a purpose-driven career, and it's all about purpose, and I call it meaning as well. When you're able to redefine and have a marker of, I guess, going from success to significance is really key. And so a lot of people, we deemed and measure success at work as being monetary rewards or having a certain title, as opposed to living and working and behaving in a moment of significance and meaning. And to me, when you're able to do that and have having that level of significance aligned with your values, as Chinasa said earlier, and your purpose, then that's when the worlds align. And so a lot of times, you know, we tend to forget about that because we're so busy, especially in those middle years with the day-to-day. But having pure joy as opposed to just happiness, because those are two different things. Well, they're interrelated, but joy to me is internally driven, and happiness is more externally a response. And so you can have both. But when you are living in joy, you are really riding that wave of significance, of meaning, of purpose. And that's, to me, is a short answer. We can unpack that longer, but to me, it's all about having a moment of significance, working with a feeling of significance and meaning in that, and purpose.
Thank you. And thank you for describing that difference between happiness and joy. That's very similar, to how I describe it as well. My follow-up question is sort of a scenario that a lot of people might find themselves in. So I'll use my son as an example. He's 27 years old. And he still hasn't reached the career of his dreams, which is, requires a certain college degree, and he's working towards those goals, but he's not there. In the meantime, he needs to get a job that will enable him to, continue to survive. So how does somebody in a situation like that, you're not in the career of your dreams, you're on the journey perhaps, or maybe you're in a transition and you're not really sure where you're going to go, and your job is something that is just a mundane thing that doesn't feel like it has purpose for you. How do you find purpose in a situation like that? And I'll just let anybody jump in.
I'll mention the first thing that came to my mind as you were posing the scenario is that sometimes jobs may be transactional because they're getting you towards a bigger goal. And so, as you mentioned, your son has aspirations to pursue his dream career, but may not be there yet. So in the interim, the job is serving its purpose with being able to provide resources and support, financial support in this current season of life, but having the eye set on the bigger goal at hand, which is to get to that designated career spot. And I think that piece is okay when we recognize that we may not be where we might want to be just yet, but we're still aiming in that direction.
Thank you.
Pamela, can I ask what his dream career is? Because that might change the answer.
Yeah, and it's evolving, but it's entertainment in general, because it was film, and that's his major, and now he's looking to transition to music. So in that world of entertainment.
Yeah, I would say that it's similar, to what Chinasa said. How can you start to take small steps towards that, right? Like, how do you start to take, or how does he start to take, if you keep that as the long-term vision or the long-term destination, what are some short-term things that he can do to get there? Whether it could be taking a course somewhere that would get him in that direction online. There's lots of free online courses, finances is an issue, or is it volunteering or interning somewhere with a few hours that, is in the same industry that he wants to be in? Is it finding a mentor or someone, that can take him in that direction, reading a biography of someone he admires in that field? There's any number of small initial steps that you can take. And then anything he can do to network with people in that industry, I think would be potentially quite powerful. And then offer, his services, even in a small way, as a contractor, as a volunteer, as an intern, just to get started. I think that could be one way, but keeping his current work going and his current, achieving that, taking care of his immediate needs, but at the same time, is that 10% of his time that could go towards moving in the direction he wants to go in.
Yeah, that would just quickly add to that because both Chinasa and Roshan mentioned some great points. In addition to that, Roshan, you mentioned this a little bit as well as far as mentorship. I was going to say, make sure to use the underestimated power of relationships, meaningful relationships, because to me, that is the secret sauce also of finding joy, because a lot of what we're going to talk about and what we should talk about is very internally driven, things that we can do, steps that we can take, right? Redefining mindset, finding purpose. But the undercurrent of all those things are the power of our networking relationships, because you can lean on someone in your circle of influence and impact that may be in the role that you're looking to pursue, right? Whether it's film or music, and they can provide different intelligence. Maybe they can see some of those blind spots that are hindering you from getting from point A to point B. So really utilizing and nurturing and cultivating your relationships, especially not just relationships, but meaningful relationships, right? Because we all have relationships with individuals, but some of those individuals in that circle may not be able to get us to that point B and that career of significance and meaning. So I'll just say, use the power of your relationships, and always remember that joy and mastery just does not come from solitude and self-reliance. And so that would be, I would say, is the key driver in that.
Yeah, wow, beautifully said. So I'm going to shift a little bit and focus in on each of you and just kind of ask you specific questions around what your experiences and your expertise. And I'll start with Chinasa. Can you shed light on the idea of trauma-informed leadership and how it can contribute to a healthier work environment?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question, because I think it's so important when we think about how trauma is exhibited in the workplace, that we think about the leaders that have an opportunity to really make a more systemic impact. And so I would say this, that adopting a trauma-informed lens to leadership requires a leader to be aware of individuals' needs within their organization. And so we know that we have lived in a series of, unfortunately, traumatic events these past several years. And a trauma-informed leader is one who decides to intentionally lead with their heart, and one that really centers empathy and care in that response. I think the pandemic, I keep saying the pandemic because I know that we're kind of moving full steam ahead towards these post-pandemic years, but the disparate impacts from the pandemic are still lingering. The grief, the loss, all of the myriad of emotions that have come up for us as we've navigated these past couple of years have been really, really hard. And so a trauma-informed leader is one that recognizes that the people that are returning back to the workplace are not the same people that left pre-2020. We've seen too much life. Yeah. Too much has happened, and there's a different response that's required. And I think for a leader who wants to be trauma-informed, they really have to lean into this notion of really leading with care and really establishing a realm where people can really feel safe and nurtured in that space, and not really just focus on the bottom line or getting the agenda done. Those things are important, but when people know that you care for them, when they know that you're willing to invest in their well-being, then they're even more committed to the organization itself. And I think those things need to be really stressed for one who may want to adopt a trauma-informed perspective as a leader.
Yeah, thank you for that. Shifting to, and I'm resisting diving into more questions about that, but but if any of you have questions, definitely throw them in the chat. We are watching. So Adrion, can you share your perspective on the unique challenges faced by mid-career professionals, and how age inclusion can change the narrative? But really those unique challenges, what's so unique about this phase of life in this career?
Yeah, woo, what's so unique about it? so many of us. I kind of touched on that a little bit. I mentioned what I'm obsessed with is actual, data about why we feel this slump in the middle. So I referenced the happiness U curve, which is what I live and breathe by, to flatten that curve. That this is something that, again, has been proven through social sciences, through economists across the world, across multiple countries, both longitudinal and self-reported, that we do follow this U-shaped level of happiness. However, my goal is to not accept it and say, I'll just wait it out until I get older and receive joy and happiness again and go through the slump. No, let's intentionally flatten the curve. And so those unique challenges, and they're driven by multiple factors, obviously. So, when you are at this season of your life, whether it's, in your 40s and 50s, in the middle, the level of goals and expectations you set previously, they're level setting now, and you're realizing, wait a minute, am I not where I wanted to be? Or you may be caregiving for not only your kids, but for aging parents. You have the traffic jam of life. There are many reasons why we go through this slump. So those are some of those unique challenges that are germane to people in that unique period. Great, okay, well, how do we get out of it? And this is the work that I do. So I've codified things that we all know, but I want to codify something and put language to something that people can use as practical. And I've created a framework called the Malaise to Mastery Map. And it's basically 3 pillars or cornerstones of how to get unstuck and thrive and find mastery in those middle years or any age. And number 1, it starts with mindset. And so that is really, it's all about reframing, reimagining, and understanding, number 1, that this malaise and stagnation is real. We all go through it. Actually, many of those studies were also done on other primates, such as apes, believe it or not, and they go through a middle slump. Now, how they can't self-report, but how they respond to certain stimuli, they actually have a mid-career, midlife malaise feeling. And so it's probably biologically wired in us. And so it probably lives in the life sciences in addition to the social sciences. So number 1, the mindset is understanding that this is normal. We're going to go through these periods of ennui. However, let's reframe what does it mean to be in the middle. Let's reframe the understanding that we're now embarking upon the 100-year life or the 60-year career. We're aging, we're working longer. So that means we have more runway. And so it's reframing your mindset, understanding and having embracing a growth mindset. And that means embracing a lifelong learning mindset. And then the second pillar is meaning. That's all about what we've been talking about for the previous 20 minutes. How do I discover and define what's meaningful for me at this stage of my life in the mid-career season that was probably different to my values when I was in my 20s? Because trust me, my values and meanings and when I was 25 is so different than what it is right now. So it's really leaning into meaning and purpose, finding meaningful and joy, understanding who are those people in those meaningful relationships. And then the last pillar of this Malaise to Mastery map is all about milestones. And Roshan mentioned this earlier as far as goals. So often in the middle, when you're mid-career or midlife, you're absent of these intentional milestones, right? So when you're younger, you turn 18, you graduate from college, you get your first job, you date, you get your first boyfriend or girlfriend, you get married. When you're later, you retire. But in that middle, it's like one long run-on sentence, right? No periods. But that is the most critical time when you need to intentionally establish and create targetable milestones that are giving you and moving you toward that higher order purpose and those goals. And then not only create those milestones, but also, as Roshan mentioned, celebrate milestones. Because when you celebrate milestones, it reminds you of those markers of success. It puts fuel in that fire. It adds more meat to that significance. So mindset, meaning, milestones. And to me, that is just a practical and tangible way to help people in the middle really find joy, to thrive and get unstuck. And I do that and talk about that. And I could spend more time on it, but that is essentially intentionally how we can think about reframing our mindset, discovering and defining what's meaningful for me, and then establish some of those milestones to get me to that level of joy and significance that I've been looking for.
Well, thank you. And just listening to what you said, I think answers one of the questions in the chat, which is perhaps the U curve is necessary for growth. And it sounds like it absolutely is, if nothing else, a catalyst for growth.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And yes, as Andy indicated, we'll be getting the Q&A live on in about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. So hang in there with us. Thank you. So Roshan, my question for you, hold on. I'm debating which one, I'm sorry, because we're at time, we can't cover all of them as I thought. Could you share how social problem solving careers have led to transformative change in communities, and what kind of fulfillment does this bring to those who are involved? So that purpose.
Yeah, sure. I've been in this space for more than 20 years and worked with hundreds, thousands of people. So I could give lots of examples, but I think, it's easier to say that like so many of the problems we have solved as a species, right? The progress we have made has been because of people who dedicated their lives to doing so, right? Usually we're not aware of all the good that's happening in the world because our news, our social media, our filter bubbles focus us on the bad and the unjust and the negative, right? But there's so much progress being made in all fields, right? I mean, there's great books on this. One of my favorites is a book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. But on a more like day-to-day level, there are newsletters by organizations like Future Crunch or the Conspiracy of Goodness, that just try to help you to see all of the good that's going on in the world. And if you are aware of that, then you get more positive, right? You get more positive about the world around you. And this brings fulfillment, right? Because you start to do your part to make a small piece of the world better because you were in it, right? And so for some people, that could be starting an organization or a company and employing hundreds of people. For some people, that's raising children who are wonderful human beings. For some people, that's volunteering to make their own community or even their own block a better place. And for others, it could be playing a role in addressing hunger or disease or violent conflict or climate change or any other social issue, right? So I think it really comes down to, in terms of the fulfillment piece, it really comes down to, can you look at yourself in the mirror and say that the world is better off because you were in it, right? And if so, then that's fulfillment. And I think starting to take small steps to move in that direction, I think is the first step along the way.
Thank you so much for that. I want to acknowledge one of the comments because it feeds right into one of the questions that I have for Chinasa. But the comment here is, I think it's important for leaders to themselves understand what trauma is, understand their own trauma where it exists, and the tools we now have that are available to regulate our nervous system. We often only think of things like death, major accidents, war, etc., as trauma. But we now know that this is not so. So anything that just regulates our nervous systems is traumatic, and not the incident itself, but rather one's response to it. And so my question for you is, Dr. Elue, is how can grief-informed workplaces help individuals find joy and fulfillment even in the face of trauma?
Thank you for that question, because, before I can even answer it, I have to first acknowledge that for some people, depending on the intersectionality of their identity, receiving any type of grief support or from their organizations may be seen as disingenuous, especially if they're being traumatized on their job, right? So they may not be willing to receive it if an organization has resources available because maybe they've experienced disparate mistreatment and they're suspicious of what that might look like. But for an organization that is looking to really be intentional about how they're able to support employees who are experiencing grief, and hopefully finding their ways towards joy and fulfillment after loss, I will say that it's important for organizations to really think critically about their bereavement leave policies. Currently, the US does not have a national bereavement leave policy. Typically, if your organization has one, it's between 3 to 5 days, and that's only enough for the funeral or any other burial rites that you may perform for your deceased loved one. And I want to also highlight here how the bereavement leave policies also have to expand beyond the loss of a physical loved one, and thinking about also the ways that we experience loss in other spaces. Because I think at times there's often a stigma when we talk about pet loss or other types of loss that may happen where it's still very devastating, but there's nothing to accommodate that within the workplace. And so I think organizations really thinking strategically about how they might put into place policies that really honor well-being and foster that sense of well-being in the organization is key. So thinking through policies, I would also mention here, thinking about ways that you can create an organizational care plan. And they may look different just based on how your organization is situated, but thinking about perhaps what kind of policies and practices do you have in place that you need to revisit. Sometimes our policies are antiquated. We hold it by the book and we're going by it. But if there ever were a time for us to revisit our structures and our systems, it's now. Everything has been shaking this past couple of years. And so it's an opportunity for us to really think about how might we revisit policies and practices that we have had since the dawn of time, but really begin to think about intentionally what do our employees need to really thrive and show up after various types of loss. And so I think those are some great starting points for organizations who are looking at ways to build support and to make sure that they're bringing in all voices to the table to create those policies. So it shouldn't just be the leaders who think they know. They should really take the time to have conversations and have others in the organization be really intentional about thinking through what does everyone need to really feel supported in this space after various types of loss.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, just that human-centered approach is I think people are requiring it now and leaving organizations that don't have it. So I thank you so much for that answer. So what I'm going to do now is ask you all one final question, and then we can go into the Q&A. And I'm going to start with Adrion. But this last question is, how do you see the future of work in terms of increasing joy, justice, and inclusion in our careers and daily lives?
Wow, it's a great question. So let me put the onus on, because we're talking about the future of work. I want to make sure we're speaking to those organizational leaders. And because obviously we've had a lot of self-prescribed practical things we've talked about. I think I see the future of work as really, and especially leaders at these organizations should be embracing this idea more intentionally and being intentional with helping individuals, especially, and I talk to people a lot in the middle, and I'm looking at kind of the makeup of the people on this call, and I'm assuming a lot of us are in that or upward swing, so 40, 50, 60s, and you're still in the middle. Remember, this isn't post game anymore. This is halftime, 100-year life, 60-year career. So keep that in mind. I think leaders, what they can do is help employees redefine what does it mean in their attitudes and expectations of being in this period, of how they still can find joy. There's plenty of runway left in their careers. There's plenty of time left. Again, this is halftime. Also help create a culture of learning. And I mentioned this a little bit, but I want to reemphasize how embracing a learning mindset, a growth mindset, and understanding that there are still things that you can do, skills that you can develop, upskilling, reskilling that will get you closer to joy. Because when you're succeeding in your task or your domain, you tend to be a little bit more joyful unless you're, as opposed to when you're struggling. So create a culture of learning. Also provide safe spaces for individuals, especially individuals that are possibly underrepresented, or anyone in the middle who may be going through grief. Because again, the older you get, the more grief probably you will be faced with. So providing safe spaces, facilitating mutual relationship with other like-minded individuals that may be going through some of those things that you may be going through. So be intentional with providing safe spaces, self-care, learning, create a cultural mindset, lifelong learning, and just being intentional with understanding the different nuances of everyone in their phase of life that they may be facing that may be hindering that joy.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, moving to Roshan. You want me to repeat? It's a wordy question. I'm just gonna repeat it.
All right.
How do you see the future of work in terms of increasing joy, justice, and inclusion in our careers and daily lives?
You know, I actually resonated quite a lot with what Adrion said, and in terms of, and I would agree with that and underline that. One additional perspective, I think, is that I think in many ways the future of work is actively being negotiated right now. You know, I think we were really moving in a direction, I think, towards increased purpose in the workplace. And, you know, there was all this data coming out that how companies with, you know, which had a broader sense of purpose or greater sustainability metrics were actually doing better in terms of profit and on the stock market than companies that didn't. And then the pandemic kind of threw a lot of this back up into the air again. You know, we had that whole conversation last year about the Great Resignation and all of that. And, you know, with technology and AI in particular starting to come in and shape the future of work, I think downtown areas and cities, you know, are really up in flux right now because of remote work. And if you think about all of the industries that rely on people going to the office, from parking garages to lunch cafes to, you know, any number of things, like dry cleaners, you know, I think, you know, for many of us, our daily office wear now is yoga pants, right? Or sweats. And so I think with all of that happening, there's so much that is in flux, I think. And I think an important thing is to be patient with that, dance with the ambiguity that we don't yet know how this is all going to come out, and also see opportunities to be a leader in shaping that future, right? I think anyone in leadership roles today has perhaps a great opportunity to proactively shape this future of work towards inclusion and justice, and all the things Adrion mentioned, but also realizing that we're still in a period of flux, of change, of things being negotiated, and I think that's still going to take some time. So I find it a little hard to predict like what's gonna happen, because I feel like so much has changed, but I think that's how I'm seeing it.
And I'll just jump right in to answer that question. I know Pam is making her way back here, but Roshan, your points has really hit home with me in regards to just the period of renegotiation we are in right now with the workplace. And just this notion of dancing in ambiguity as we think about what does it look like right now for us to reimagine and re-envision what it looks like to be back in person in a lot of spaces. I know for a lot of organizations, they're requiring people to come back. And in some ways that no longer serves the ways that we want to work or engage in work in terms of our interactions. And so I think the future of work definitely has to center being more humanizing and more aligned with people's values. I think people are really interested in making sure that the work that they're doing is one that brings them joy and peace and ease so that they can really develop these purposeful lives that we've been talking about today. So I think that's going to be really important and critical as we're thinking about the next season of what work looks like.
Thank you for carrying on without me. I appreciate it. So one of the things though that is unfortunate because I got kicked off for a second is I lost the chat history, but I did see that there was a question from Lori that I thought was an excellent question, and I wanted to make sure we touched on that, and then we'll jump to Dr. Julie Shaw and Lani. But there was a question from Lori, I think, that said that right now in this phase, there, especially most of the people in this room right now are probably at the 40 plus, 40, 50, 60. And for those who are in that realm, are there going to be opportunities, or how likely is it that they will find new opportunities to pursue a career with purpose and that fulfills their dreams? And this was directed for Adrion.
Yeah, no, that's a great, who asked the question? Lori?
Yeah, and it's in the chat, but I don't have that chat history anymore now.
That's always like to address. So, Lord, that's an excellent question. So I think it's incumbent upon both organizations and individuals, right? Because I hear what you're saying. If I'm 50, 40 plus, 50 plus, and I have all this experience, but I'm still faced with ageism. So I'm working with the organizations as well. So I think, again, it goes back to some of the pillars that I mentioned earlier, like things that we can intentionally do first, right? Get out of the way, understanding that the runway is long. Reframe, reimagine, what does it mean to be 45, 55, 65? That means and also make sure that you have level set it and mapped and understand what does it mean to have a meaningful career at this stage, and then work with individuals to set some of those milestones. But I would say make sure that you try to continue to look at the skill gaps, right? Because the world is changing. As Roshan mentioned earlier, we're living in a state of where we're talking AI now, and maybe it's understanding at a minimal level, like what does large language models even mean, right? You don't have to be an expert, but just understand the language and the nomenclature, right? So you can at least have a high level conversation. But more so, what I tell people all the time is that be intentional with connecting the dots. Far too often when we get in the middle and beyond, we're thinking that we're in this space that our skills don't matter. They don't matter anymore, that we're out of sync. Always connect the dots. Go back and look at those magical moments in your career, in your life, where you shine, where people say great things about you, when you're in your flow, where your values have married opportunity, and connect the dots to the opportunities that are possibly awaiting you now. And then work with coaches, work with someone like many of you on this call, like Pamela, like Roshan, like Chinasa. Work with coaches, work with individuals to help you connect the dots, look at those blind spots, do that. And then while you're doing that, we'll be working with the organizations to make sure that, hey, you pay attention to the 40 plus professional who have a breadth and wealth of experience and relationships in their quiver that can add value, especially when it comes to mentorship. Because again, part of mindset is reimagining what does it mean to be a 40+ leader. Maybe you will shine more in a mentoring role. Maybe there's incoming Gen Z or millennial that can learn how to navigate some of those human skills and leadership skills and relationship building, that there's a gap there. So again, it's working with coaches, being intentional, and making sure that you hold us accountable to work with those organizations. And then you will be a better opportunity for you to shine and thrive in this halftime season of life.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's keep our responses really short. We've got 9 minutes. I want to make sure we get to all of our people. But I want to go with Dr. Julie Shaw because you were up there earlier, and then we'll go with Lonnie. So go ahead, Julie.
All right. Thank you. I'm loving everything that y'all are talking about because I'm also a leadership consultant and coach, and then also a grief educator. So what I'm also kind of tapping into is, as we're talking about joy, how we can protect our joy, how we can cultivate our joy and make this pivot and reimagine what this new transition in our life is to seek purpose. I would love to know, like, what are some things that you have intentionally invested in or done so that we can move from this phase of what I've heard of the term of stop starting and start finishing, because we can get to this place on this upswing of where we have all these ideas of how we want to reimagine our career, but sometimes they just start, and then they go nowhere. And so how can we stop starting and start finishing, and being able to deal with those challenges? But I would love to know, what have you intentionally done or invested in to be able to get to that finish point?
I would love to jump on that one. And we didn't really talk much specifically about my work around joy, but one of the components in terms of creating joy in your professional and your personal life is that of community. And so I think one of my most valuable investments has been in my community and building a community, what I call a community of joy, that supports, in which we support each other, in which we do things like whatever it is that nurtures our souls, which might be taking a trip together or coming over to my house and all watching masterclass. Whatever that is, I've invested my time into creating and curating this community that gives me the energy and the life, the hunger, I guess, for life to pursue those goals and to, I don't even want to say hold each other accountable, but to inspire each other to continue to push forward. So for me, that investment has been more about time and relationship building.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go to Lonnie. I think you're still muted.
Muted.
There you go.
Unmute.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, all of that speaks to me. I wanted to just share that. So I am 65, turned this year, and I was the one who wrote in the chat about trauma and etc. And one of the things I've done is I've always heard, and it might have come out of the Happiness Project, to keep a gratitude journal, to keep, gratitude in front of you. And I was doing that for a long time. And after our son died, he was 27 and it was in 2017. So we're 6 years out from that. I realized that for me, it was more about also keeping like a victory journal, because it's the small incremental things that have really made a difference. Because every day I'm so grateful for my family, the community I've built around me. It's always been important to me to have community, but I often lost sight of how much momentum I was making day to day or month to month, and others would see and I wouldn't. And so for me to take time to reflect on that has really helped me to have joy and, in my own personal life. And I'm kind of at the end of a career in a way. I work in project management and construction, but through the grief of losing Zach, and also prior to that, a 10-year journey of a deep heroin addiction of my daughter, who is doing wonderful now. Thank you. Very happy about that. But we were so on the edge with her, anticipating constantly just this horrific disease of addiction, has given me the opportunity to learn about grief, trauma, addiction, that I feel as if, and someone spoke to this, that we really need to look at what we have. Like, I want to be able to use all of these things. I know that I've got so much, and sometimes it's hard to know where to put it, how to get all of these things that, I'm the podcast, books and everything else, but to narrow it down enough to make that impact. And the one way that I am doing it, and I would just put forth the question, is there some suggestions of better than this, but is I start small in my community. I took a 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I just do it in my sunroom with my friends, like just that small community. Can I make a career out of that? I don't even know that I want to necessarily, but it just feels like I need to do something with all of this. And yet it's hard to figure out where to go with it.
Wow, so many nuggets, Lonnie. Thank you so much. And I would say for any of the panelists, if you wouldn't mind putting any answers, thoughts in the chat, because I think it's time to pass this over to Andy. But your question is so powerful. And so if there is anything that any of the panelists want to add, let's do that. And then I will say, let's give each panelist about 20 seconds to just, final word. And then we're handing it over to Andy because we have 3 minutes. So let's start with.
Actually, Pamela, I just do want to say we did schedule this for quarter after the hour. So if we could take like one or two more questions, I think.
Perfect. So let's thank you. Let's let the panelists answer that question then, because there was so much that Lana just said that I want to make sure, or Lonnie, I'm sorry. I want to make sure we touch on that then. Whoever wants to jump in.
Could you repeat the question if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
Want me to repeat it, you mean? I was saying that with all of the knowledge that has come from the trauma, the grief, and the addiction that I've just, steeped myself in for the last 10 years at least, studying, Gabor Mate, Peter Levine, on and on, like, how can I use that beyond what I had started to do, which is just my small community? They've come to me, people have just shown up asking. And so it's been a natural transition in the small community, but I want to do more. But I'm 65 and I'm fear the ageism, and I've got my master's. Like, I don't want to go back to school and learn a ton of things. I really know my niche. So although I could, it feels like a waste of time sort of to study too broadly when I really know what I've been through and what I have
I'll just quickly weigh in because
to offer in a way of a degree, if you will.
I'll just quickly weigh in because Lonnie, as you were talking, I just, first of all, just want to extend my deepest condolences to you. And thank you so much for sharing the loss in this space. One thing that came to me is, oftentimes we think that we've run out of time to really do anything meaningful with all of our life's experiences, but I think there's a perfect time for you to really share your story in various outlets, right? I think depending on within your comfort level, writing books, writing blogs, speaking about your experience, getting online, starting a YouTube channel, perhaps to build even a bigger online community that talks about the different components that you've mentioned, could be a really meaningful way that you're able to share your story and also connect with others on a much more global stage. And so that's what I would offer to you as you're thinking about how might your lived experiences, every aspect of it, be used for more global reach. And I think there's an opportunity there because you said so much, and I can't really fully emote and share how much it's meant to hear your story, even in the smaller context, but I think it would have much more meaning and impact as you feel led to share your story with others.
Yes, thank you again. So we'll go to Taylor. Taylor Holloway has a question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's been beautiful in listening to everybody. Everything that all of the panelists have shared has resonated so well with me. I think it's strange. I might be younger in this group. I'm actually 37. And I was like, wait, people in their 30s feel these things. You don't have to be older than 40.
That's true.
And the thing that I've been thinking about is like, the power of stuckness and how you know which whispers are the right whispers. And I've been doing this thing this past year where when I'm with my partner and in the life that I live, I've been thinking like, there's something else. I need something else. Like, I'm good at what I do. I make the most money I've ever made. I'm secure and stable after a very insecure and unstable childhood with a single mother and an addict father. And then when I'm away on my own, I feel kind of free and like I can do things on my own. But I'm wondering like why a person like myself who has all the things that you would want, like the trappings of a partner who loves me and a job where I'm, as further as in my career as I've ever been, and then still be wondering about something else, because I feel like I'm a little bit afraid to take leaps that I took at younger ages in my life and younger times. And I wonder if I'm being grateful enough for all that I've done and all that I've built. And so I was just wondering, like, how do you know which whispers are the right whispers and which whispers are like, girl, sit your butt down? Like, so that's what I'm navigating right now, because some of my friends are like, be free. And I'm like, wait, I have a mortgage though. So I just want to talk about how do you know which whispers to listen to? Thank you.
I have to jump on this one, and then I can see Adrian is getting ready to say something. So let me just really quickly say that I love Marie Kondo's method of those things that spark joy. And what she basically says is that if you're cleaning out a house or whatever, you decide what to keep and what to get rid of by determining which one of those things spark joy. And so that's what I recommend when it's in terms of what whisperings to listen to. What sparks joy inside of you when you hear it? And to go into that direction. And so that's just me coming from my joy perspective, but I would love to hear Adrian's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We don't even have enough time, so I'll try to do quick. There's so much there. I mean, going back to what you said, Pamela, I think what you do is it's all about intention, right? So think about, and you said you're in your 30s. So remember, the U curve starts, early. So you're still on the downward slope of the U curve, even in your 30s. So it's natural to feel this way. And then you said, you're questioning, why should I feel this way? I have everything that I ever want. It's most of the time when we go through this feeling of unweaned malaise, we're very successful. And so like Arthur Brooks, who wrote the book From Strength to Strength, he calls it the striver's curse, right? We're strivers. We want the best out of life. But then when sometimes it's not congruent where we are with where we think we should be. So I think it's all about listening to, being intentional with trying to define, okay, I have all this experience. I have all of these plans. How do I connect that with what's really, really, really meaningful to me? And again, it goes back to community and relationships. Many times people can see those blind spots or see those areas of opportunity that you can't see. Lean upon those magical, meaningful relationships to help close those gaps. I have people go through an exercise called the 3-word exercise, where they ask many of their people in their close, meaningful relationship circle to define 3 words that describe them and or describe what will be the ideal career for them, right? Based on how well they know them. And come back and you'll see all these responses that come back to you, and you would be amazed of the enlightenment, because those are blind spots. People who know you well and see how you shine can possibly see those gaps in those areas of opportunities that you can't see. Those are the whispers, those tangible whispers that you can listen to. Actually, they're not even whispers, they're shouts, right? So lean upon those relationships and make sure that you do the intentional introspective exercises as well, and then you'll be in a better position.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've seen some in the chat that have come up along the way. And I will say, one of the comments is that the joy doesn't always, pay the mortgage. And I totally get that 100%. And that's where it sometimes is about in working with a coach and figuring out how you take those things that do spark joy and turning them into something that can bring meaning and fulfillment to your life. Because what it can do is be a reservoir of of life that you might be able to dip into while you're doing the things that do pay the bill. And so there's ways to still go in those directions and integrate those things into our lives. Okay. Well, I think we might be good. So thank you so much for enabling this conversation, Andy, and to Reimagine, because this has been a wonderful conversation that I think each and every one of us could have dove even deeper and probably done a single conversation on each one of our topics. So I am handing the mic over to you, Andy.
Thank you so much for leading this conversation. I also want to thank our wonderful speakers, Roshan, Adrion, and Chinasa. There was so much wisdom, so much gentleness, so much heart in this conversation. And I want to thank all of you for opening up your hearts to us, for those of you who asked questions, who made comments. And I encourage all of you to join us for the next two sessions that are part of this series. We've got on July 19th, the same time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, a workshop, a participatory event with Mina B, who is a mental health specialist. She will equip all of you with tools to strive for work-life harmony. So work-life balance, not so sure that really exists anymore. Most people are just talking about work-life integration or work-life harmony. So I hope you can join us for that. She'll be joined by Eric Solomon, who is a Reimagine board member and founder of the Human OS. He'll do the introduction and lead some Q&A. And then on July 26th, we've got our final session, Let's Take Action, which will include breakout sessions. We're going to be working with two design thinkers, Tracy DeLuca and Jeremy Sutherland, who's also another Reimagine board member. We're going to harness design, creativity, and play to cultivate resilience and abundance, both in our personal lives and our professional lives. So please join us for that. I pasted a link for you to register for those in the chat. Once again, thank you to our wonderful speakers. And I hope to see all of you or some of you next week and the following week. Any last words, Roshan, Adrion, Chinasa?
I'll just offer a quick word here in terms of how we've been having this conversation today around joy. And I don't want to underscore today the point I made earlier about how we're still walking through some of the impacts from the pandemic. And so I think it's important to realize that we can live in this duality of experiencing both joy and grief, or joy and name whatever other adjective may be in existence for you in this moment. And that the duality of both things can be okay in our existence as we're thinking about how do we really create purposeful lives. And so I think it's important for us to not think that, oh, I'm not fully in joy because I'm walking through so much pain, but there may be moments of joy that happen. And maybe you're having a really great day, but you're reminded or triggered of something that was really hurtful in the past. It's okay to kind of lean into both sides of that, because we've had various human experiences, and this is kind of the collective part of what we've walked through on our time on Earth. So thank you, and it's been great to be with you all today.
Building on what Chinasa said, but also she wanted to share that Lani's story reminded me of one of my favorite quotes or songs from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. And you know, it's something that's commonly shared in conversations like this. But I think it goes something like this, you know, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in. And that's something that, you know, for me always resonates, especially when we're talking about how do we overcome adversity and use our or harness that adversity into something, you know, magical going forward. Thank you again for the invitation, everyone. And thanks for my fellow panelists as well, and Pamela for a fantastic facilitation.
Wow, that was wonderful. I will follow that. Just quickly, again, words of advice, just be inspired by the conversations today. Be inspired by the dialogue, be inspired by the stories shared, and be inspired by your own journey. Again, too often when we go through this trauma and feeling of malaise and ennui, we forget about the magic in our own stories. And so just again, what I live and breathe by, just focus on these three things: reframing your mindset, reimagining what does it mean to find joy. Number two, focus on discovering and defining what's meaningful for you. And then please establish those micro and those macro milestones to get you from point A to point B. And always remember there's magic in the middle. All right, there's magic in the middle. That's it.
Thank you all, and I hope you all find some joy today. Take good care. Bye.